Designed to help you fall asleep. On Snoozecast, we read excerpts from public domain works and, occasionally, original stories. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Spotify, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Instagram, among others. We'd like to thank our listeners. If you enjoy our show, please write us a review. Also, share it with a friend. This episode is brought to you by the murmur of a neighbor's lawnmower. Tonight, we'll be reading the opening to Stephen Leacock's 1912 Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. This humorous and affectionate account of small-town life in the fictional town of Mariposa is inspired by the author's experience living in Ontario, Canada. The book illustrates the inner workings of life in Mariposa, from business to politics to steamboat disasters. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. Chapter 1. The Hostility of Mr. Smith. I don't know whether you know Mariposa. If not, it is of no consequence, for if you know Canada at all, you are probably well acquainted with a dozen towns just like it. There it lies in the sunlight, sloping up from the little lake that spreads out at the foot of the hillside on which the town is built. There is a wharf beside the lake, and lying alongside of it, a steamer that is tied to the wharf with two ropes of about the same size as they use on the Lusitania. The steamer goes nowhere in particular, for the lake is landlocked, and there is no navigation for the Mariposa Belle except to run trips on the 1st of July and the Queen's birthday, and to take excursions of the Knights of Pythias and the Sons of Temperance to and from the local option townships. In point of geography, the lake is called Lake Wisonati, and the river running out of it, the Ossawippi, just as the main street of Mariposa is called Missinaba Street, and the county, Missinaba County. But these names do not really matter. Nobody uses them. People simply speak of the lake and the river and the main street, much in the same way as they always call the Continental Hotel Pete Robinson's and the Pharmaceutical Hall Elliot's Drugstore. But I suppose this is just the same in everyone else's town as in mine, so I need lay no stress on it. The town, I say, has one broad street that runs up from the lake, commonly called the Main Street. There is no doubt about its width. When Mariposa was laid out, there was none of that short-sightedness which is seen in the cramped dimensions of Wall Street and Piccadilly. Missinaba Street is so wide that if you were to roll Jeff Thorpe's barber shop over on its face, it wouldn't reach halfway across. Up and down the main street are telegraph poles of cedar of colossal thickness, standing at a variety of angles, and carrying rather more wires than are commonly seen at a transatlantic cable station. On the main street itself are a number of buildings of extraordinary importance. Smith's Hotel and the Continental and the Mariposa House, and the two banks, the Commercial and the Exchange, to say nothing of McCarthy's Block, erected in 1878, and Glover's Hardware Store, with the Odd Fellows Hall above it. Then on the cross street that intersects Missinaba Street, at the main corner, there is the post office, and the fire hall, and the Young Men's Christian Association, and the office of the Mariposa News Packet. In fact, to the eye of discernment, a perfect jostle of public institutions comparable only to Threadneedle Street or Lower Broadway. On all the side streets there are maple trees and broad sidewalks, trim gardens with upright calla lilies, houses with verandas, which are here and there being replaced by residences with piazzas. To the careless eye, the scene on the main street of a summer afternoon is one of deep and unbroken peace. The empty street sleeps in the sunshine. There is a horse and buggy tied to the hitching post in front of Glover's Hardware Store. There is, usually and commonly, the burly figure of Mr. Smith, proprietor of Smith's Hotel, standing in his checkered waistcoat on the steps of his hostelry, and perhaps, further up the street, Lawyer Macartney going for his afternoon mail, or the Reverend Mr. Drone, the rural dean of the Church of England Church, going home to get his fishing rod after a Mother's Auxiliary meeting. But this quiet is mere appearance. In reality, and to those who know it, the place is a perfect hive of activity. Why, at Netley's barber shop, established in 1882, there are no less than 4 men working on the sausage machines in the basement. At the Newspacket office, there are as many more job printing. There is a long-distance telephone with 4 distracting girls on high stools wearing steel caps and talking incessantly. In the offices in McCarthy's Block are dentists and lawyers with their coats off, ready to work at any moment. And from the big planing factory down beside the lake, where the railroad siding is, you may hear all through the hours of the summer afternoon the long-drawn music of the running saw. Busy? Well, I should think so. Ask any of its inhabitants if Mariposa isn't a busy, hustling, thriving town. Ask Mullins, the manager of the Exchange Bank, who comes hustling over to his office from the Mariposa house every day at 10:30 and has scarcely time all morning to go out and take a drink with the manager of the commercial, or ask, well, for the matter of that, ask any of them if they ever knew a more rushing go-ahead town than Mariposa. Of course, if you come to the place fresh from New York, you're deceived. Your standard of vision is all astray. You do think the place is quiet. You do imagine that Mr. Smith is asleep merely because he closes his eyes as he stands. But live in Mariposa for 6 months or a year, and then you will begin to understand it better. The buildings get higher and higher. The Mariposa house grows more and more luxurious. McCarthy's block towers to the sky. The buses roar and hum in the station. The trains shriek. The traffic multiplies. The people move faster and faster. A dense crowd swirls to and fro in the post office and the 5 and 10 cent store. And amusements? Well now, lacrosse, baseball, excursions, dances, the firemen's ball every winter, and the Catholic picnic every summer, and music, the town band in the park every Wednesday evening, and the Oddfellows brass band on the street every other Friday, the Mariposa Quartet, the Salvation Army. Why, after a few months' residence, you begin to realize that the place is a mere mad round of gaiety. In point of population, if one must come down to figures, the Canadian census puts the numbers every time at something round 5,000. But it is very generally understood in Mariposa that the census is largely the outcome of malicious jealousy. It is usual that after the census, the editor of the Mariposa news packet makes a careful re-estimate based on the data of relative non-payment of subscriptions and brings the population up to 6,000. After that, the Mariposa Times-Herald makes an estimate that runs the figures up to 6,500. Then Mr. Gingham, the undertaker, who collects the vital statistics for the provincial government, makes an estimate from the number of what he calls the demised, as compared with the less interesting persons who are still alive, and brings the population to 7,000. After that, somebody else works it out that it's 7,500. Then the man behind the bar of the Mariposa house offers to bet the whole room that there are 9,000 people in Mariposa. That settles it, and the population is well on the way to 10,000 when down swoops the federal census taker on his next round, and the town has to begin all over again. Still, it is a thriving town, and there is no doubt of it. Even the transcontinental railways, as any townsman will tell you, run through Mariposa. It is true that the trains mostly go through at night and don't stop, but in the wakeful silence of the summer night, you may hear the long whistle of the through train for the west as it tears through Mariposa, rattling over the switches and past the semaphores, and ending in a long, sullen roar as it takes the trestle bridge over the Ossawippi. Or, better still, on a winter evening, about 8 o'clock, you will see the long row of the Pullmans and diners of the night express going north to the mining country, the windows flashing with brilliant light, and within them a vista of cut glass and snow-white table linen, smiling faces, and millionaires with napkins at their chins whirling past in the driving snowstorm. I can tell you, the people of Mariposa are proud of the trains, even if they don't stop. The joy of being on the main line lifts the Mariposa people above the level of their neighbors in such places as Tecumseh and Nichols Corners, into the cosmopolitan atmosphere of through traffic and the larger life. Of course, they have their own train, too, the Mariposa Local, made up right there in the station yard, and running south to the city 100 miles away. That, of course, is a real train, with a box stove on end in the passenger car, fed with cordwood upside down, and with 17 flat cars of pine lumber set between the passenger car and the locomotive so as to give the train its full impact when shunting. Outside of Mariposa, there are farms that begin well but get thinner and meaner as you go on, and end sooner or later in bush and swamp and the rock of the North Country. And beyond that again, as the background of it all, though it's far away, you are somehow aware of the great pine woods of the lumber country reaching endlessly into the north. Not that the little town is always gay or always bright in the sunshine. There never was such a place for changing its character with the season. Dark enough and dull it seems of a winter night, the wooden sidewalks creaking with the frost, and the lights burning dim behind the shop windows. In olden times, the lights were coal oil lamps. Now, of course, they are, or are supposed to be, electricity, brought from the powerhouse on the lower Ossawippi, 19 miles away. But somehow, though it starts off as electricity from the Ossawippi Rapids, by the time it gets to Mariposa and filters into the little bulbs behind the frosty windows of the shops, it's turned into coal oil again, as yellow and bleared as ever. After the winter, the snow melts and the ice goes out of the lake. The sun shines high, and the shantymen come down from the lumber woods and lie round drunk on the sidewalk outside of Smith's hotel, and that's springtime. Mariposa is then a fierce, dangerous lumber town, calculated to terrorize the soul of a newcomer who does not understand that this also is only an appearance, and that presently the rough-looking shantymen will change their clothes and turn back into farmers. Then the sun shines warmer and the maple trees come out, and Lawyer McCartney puts on his tennis trousers. And that's summertime. The little town changes to a sort of summer resort. There are visitors up from the city. Every one of the 7 cottages along the lake is full. The Mariposa Belle churns the waters of the Wisonati into foam as she sails out from the wharf in a cloud of flags, the band playing, and the daughters and sisters of the Knights of Pythias dancing gaily on the deck. That changes too. The days shorten. The visitors disappear. The goldenrod beside the meadow droops and withers on its stem. The maples blaze in glory and die. The evening closes dark and chill, and in the gloom of the main corner of Mariposa, the Salvation Army around a naphtha lamp lift up the confession of their sins. And that is autumn. Thus the year runs its round, moving and changing in Mariposa, much as it does in other places. If, then, you feel that you know the town well enough to be admitted into the inner life and movement of it, walk down this June afternoon halfway down the main street, or, if you like, halfway up from the wharf to where Mr. Smith is standing at the door of his hostelry. You will feel as you draw near that it is no ordinary man that you approach. It is not alone the huge bulk of Mr. Smith, 280 pounds as tested on Netley scales. It's not merely his costume, though the checkered waistcoat of dark blue with a flowered pattern forms, with his shepherd's plaid trousers, his gray spats, and patent leather boots, a color scheme of no mean order. Nor is it merely Mr. Smith's finely modeled face. The face, no doubt, is a notable one, solemn, inexpressible, unreadable, the face of the heaven-born hotel keeper. It's more than that. It's the strange, dominating personality of the man that somehow holds you captive. I know nothing in history to compare with the position of Mr. Smith among those who drank over his bar, except, though in a lesser degree, the relation of the Emperor Napoleon to the Imperial Guard. When you meet Mr. Smith first, you think he looks like an overdressed pirate. Then you begin to think him a character. You wonder at his enormous bulk. Then the utter hopelessness of knowing what Smith is thinking by merely looking at his features gets on your mind and makes the Mona Lisa seem an open book and the ordinary human countenance as superficial as a puddle in the sunlight. After you've had a drink in Mr. Smith's bar and he has called you by your Christian name, you realize that you're dealing with one of the greatest minds in the hotel business. Take, for instance, the big sign that sticks out into the street above Mr. Smith's head as he stands. What is on it? Joseph Smith, prop. Nothing more. And yet the thing was a flash of genius. Other men who had had the hotel before Mr. Smith had called it by such feeble names as the Royal Hotel and the Queen's and the Alexandria. Every one of them failed. When Mr. Smith took over the hotel, he simply put up the sign with Joseph Smith, proprietor, and then stood underneath in the sunshine as a living proof that a man who weighs nearly 300 pounds is the natural king of the hotel business. But on this particular afternoon, in spite of the sunshine and deep peace, there was something as near to profound concern and anxiety as the features of Mr. Smith were ever known to express. The moment was indeed an anxious one. Mr. Smith was awaiting a telegram from his legal advisor, who had that day journeyed to the county town to represent the proprietor's interest before the assembled license commissioners. If you know anything of the hotel business at all, you'll understand that as beside the decisions of the license commissioners of Wisonati County, the opinions of the lords of the Privy Council are mere trifles. The matter in question was very grave. The Mariposa court had just fined Mr. Smith for the second time for selling liquors